And welcome to Qnews special coverage, and I'm Salma Al-Fi'i. Tonight, two flashpoints dominate the global stage. In Gaza, the Israeli gunfire at an aid distribution site leaves 4 Palestinians dead as humanitarian operations collapse under siege. And in Los Angeles, unrest erupts over aggressive U.S. immigration raids, prompting a National Guard deployment and mask bans at protests. From Gaza to LA, Qnews follows the fallout of force and fear. Stay tuned with us on Qnews. Palestinian medics have reported that 4 people were killed and others injured by the Israeli gunfire near an aid distribution site in Rafah, southern Gaza Strip. The Israeli occupation army said its forces fired warning shots after perceiving a threat from a group approaching soldiers outside the official aid distribution hours. This incident is the latest near aid distribution points since the controversial Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, backed by Israel and the U.S., began distributing aid late last month. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has suspended operations, citing direct threats from Hamas, according to the U.S. and Israeli-backed groups. The organization had planned to reopen 2 aid centers in Rafah on Sunday, but its earlier announcement was removed from Facebook. The aid initiative, supported by the U.S. and Israel, has drawn criticism. UN Secretary General's spokesman called the plan a recipe for disaster earlier this week. The Gaza Health Ministry has warned that hospitals in the besieged enclave could become graveyards within 48 hours due to a severe fuel shortage. Director Munir El-Barsh said that the Israeli blockade preventing fuel entry is cutting off the lifeline to hospitals. Alongside fuel shortages, there is a critical lack of medicines and medical supplies. El-Barsh also called for immediate entry of the stranded WHO trucks near the Palestinian Rafah border crossing. He added that despite emergency plans, Gaza's healthcare system is now overwhelmed. He urged the international organizations to act swiftly to break the siege and to prevent a humanitarian disaster. The death toll in Gaza's conflict has reached 54,880, with 126,227 injured since October 7, 2023. The Health Ministry reported in the past 24 hours alone, at least 108 Palestinians were killed and 393 injured in Israeli attacks across Gaza. Since Israel broke the ceasefire in March, 4,603 Palestinians have been killed and 14,186 have been injured. And for further analysis on the matter, Ahmed Fouad Anwar, the Israeli affairs researcher, joins us from Cairo. Welcome, sir, and welcome to Qnews. Let me ask you first, how do the repeated incidents of the civilian deaths near the aid sites impact the legitimacy and safety of aid operations in Gaza, sir?
After greetings to you and to the viewers, clearly that there are reusing low uh, failed attempts to distribute aid under a different umbrella compared to the United Nations. They tried the maritime pavement and it failed, and this attempt ended with failure. They and consequently, I think that this path mobilizes the public opinion and the international community to rectify this path to assign the aid distribution to the UNRWA and the United Nations, especially that the relief schemes through U.S. Companies or U.S. contractors and militias related to criminal gangs. I think these things pollute the idea of aid and outs the conspiracy of drawing the population from the north to the south to the Egyptian borders, as they might actually pressure Egypt by this. I think this is clear and can be read through the distribution centers focused in the south.
Mr. Anwar, can you share with us, please, what are the legal and ethical implications of the Israeli army firing on the civilians near the aid distribution points, even if warning shots were claimed?
Of course, this violates the international law, and it goes with the genocide scheme to annihilate the Palestinian population. This is a trap for the starved population with coupons to actually receive very little aid, and then they open fire by helicopters or tanks. Uh, this is now very clear, and I think the international community shall take its responsibility, especially that the international court is now going after Netanyahu and his assistants. The International Criminal Court also is prosecuting him, and there is sympathy from the international community, which was translated by the Security Council vote, as 14 states voted for the ceasefire against a veto by the United States. I think these incidents lead to further isolation of the United States with Israel, and the U.S. administration or Trump administration will have to reconsider and pressure the Netanyahu government. They now need to separate the Israeli interests from the U.S. interests. Everyone is reviewing their stances between Trump and Netanyahu.
Well, sir, how does the suspension of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation affect the broader humanitarian relief efforts? And what role do the US and the Israeli backing play in its credibility?
Well, first, these distribution aids firing at civilians more than times, and tens fall killed and injured every day at these distribution points. This is a systematic policy and not individual incidents that in some cases that got out of control. Apparently the Israeli government is now committing even more outrageous crimes to terrorize civilians, and they are still targeting schools and hospitals that has been even bombed before. They are targeting the displaced camps in the allegedly secure regions. These are more crimes to be added to previous ones, and the current government will not be able to evade punishment. We can be reminded of the apartheid era as the government is holding on to such policies that has failed over and over to achieve the goals of the war and only express the resilience of the Palestinian people.
And well, why has the UN, do you think, sir, described the current aid mechanism as being a recipe for disaster? Then what alternatives could be offered and that could even maybe be safer and offer more effective distribution?
It is already a catastrophe, and not only by the United Nations description, but all the relevant relief institutions and organizations said so. This new institution that is trying to replace the United Nations and its agencies has proved to be a failure. There is only one legitimate path. The only alternative is the UNRWA is the only platform with the expertise and legitimacy, and there we must go back to it very quickly instead of targeting its facilities and slandering it with false accusations. I think that going back to this path is the best alternative, and the United States will no longer is now concerned more with a conflict between Trump and Musk and internal issues. This is a game Netanyahu's government is trying to play to remain longer in power, as they are now hanging by this thread. They are taking advantage of the media to slander the UNRWA and the United Nations, and in fact the entire world is condemning these procedures. The relief organization associated with the European Parliament in 24 hours will be approaching the Gaza shores, carrying 1 ton of relief, which is very symbolic, but they will be targeted by the occupation forces, and as the Israeli government is now very
Mr. Anwar, let me move on a little bit and ask you, what do you think are the consequences of the ongoing fuel blockade on Gaza's hospitals, and how close is the healthcare system totally about to collapse? How close are we?
Indeed, there is a very dangerous health catastrophe and an unprecedented food disaster. I think it's a stigma on the entire humanity to stand silent before this famine and this systematic scheme. The hospitals are without fuel, and therefore there is no way to even operate the basic essentials to save the lives of infants and the elderly. They are targeting now doctors and hospitals. One time they say that they are sheltering Yahya Sinwar and Hamas leaderships, and allow us to attack this very last place sheltering terrorists, and there are no evidence of such accusations, and there is no end to such genocide.
And that was Mr. Ahmed Fuad Anwar, the Israeli affairs researcher. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us from Cairo and joining Q News. Ladies and gentlemen, and now for the latest developments in the United States.
Donald Trump is his name, and he's there to stay.
As unlikely, impossible is now reality.
America powerful. We will win, win, win. And we will make America great again. emphatically make America great again.
U.S. President Donald Trump has praised the National Guard for its response to 2 days of unrest in Los Angeles following federal immigration raids. President Trump praised the National Guard for its response to the 2 days of violence and unrest in Los Angeles, attributing the situation to failed leadership by California's Democratic officials. He also announced a new restriction, stating that masks will no longer be permitted at protests. The protests, which began Friday, June the 6th, erupted in response to aggressive immigration enforcement actions, fueling tensions in the heavily Hispanic immigrant-rich city. President Donald Trump's administration has announced the deployment of 2,000 National Guard troops to Los Angeles as federal agents continue to clash with protesters following recent immigration raids. A White House statement accused California's Democratic leadership of failing to protect citizens, describing the situation as a lawless environment and calling the protests an effort to block the removal of criminal illegal aliens. Trump echoed that sentiment on Truth Social, blasting Governor Gavin Newsom and Mayor Karen Bass, saying the federal government will step in and solve the problem if local leaders fail to act. And Governor Newsom responded on X, calling the deployment purposefully inflammatory and warning it could escalate tensions. Federal agents have confronted protesters in southeast Los Angeles the second consecutive day of the unrest following sweeping immigration raids that led to at least 44 arrests. The Department of Homeland Security claimed 1,000 rioters had surrounded a federal facility, damaged property, and attacked the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, also known as the ICE officers. Senior White House aide Stephen Miller described the protests as an insurrection against the laws and sovereignty of the United States. President Trump has vowed to expand deportations dramatically, with the ICE reportedly targeting 3,000 migrant arrests per day. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has said that active duty Marines at Camp Pendleton are on high alert and could be deployed if violence continues during the immigration-related protests in Los Angeles. And in a post on X, Hegseth condemned what he described as violent assaults on federal law enforcement, calling the unrest a national security risk driven by criminal cartels. He confirmed the immediate mobilization of the National Guard to support federal agents. The warning followed tense confrontations between protesters and federal security forces in the Paramount area, where demonstrators waved Mexican flags, and a smaller rally in downtown LA, where crowds chanted ICE out of LA. Activists have gathered outside a Tesla store in New York City to protest former Doge chief and billionaire Elon Musk, as well as the U.S. President Donald Trump, over funding cuts. Andrew Green, the chief operating officer of the NGO Housing Works, explained that Musk and Trump significantly influenced funding. He noted that their actions led to substantial cuts to the United States President's emergency plan for AIDS relief, the PEPFAR, which in turn affected the international community's access to antiretrovirus. Trump froze many foreign aid programs earlier in his presidency before reinstating some life-saving assistance. And PEPFAR funding also supported the NGO-run clinics, many of which have since closed. And for further analysis on the matter, we are joined by Mr. Majid Boudin, an international law professor from Paris. And welcome, sir, to Qnews.
Welcome.
Sir, what are the constitutional and legal implications of banning masks at protests, do you think, especially in the context of civil liberties?
Well, this is these protests are protected by the U.S. Constitution, so nobody can forbid them, only for public policy reasons. If there is a threat to the security of the area, of the country, of the city, they can give limits to the protests. But if not, this is covered by the Constitution, and nobody can stop it. The point here is different, is why the President of the U.S. is trying to, it has sent the National Guard, while under the Constitution, it's up to the mayor first to control the protests and to give authorization or not, or to make intervention by its local police or by the governor of the state. And it's only in the last resort, when the governor cannot control the situation and will ask help from the U.S. president, then the U.S. president will send the National Guard, but not before.
Sir, how might the deployment of the National Guard troops, do you think, potentially the active duty Marines, affect the balance between maintaining order and escalating public unrest?
Yeah, this is what the local authorities are saying. They said that they can control the protests. They have no reasons to forbid them, but they can control them. And of course, in a lot of protests, you have violence like this, but they are still under control. But here, it's a political issue. It's not a legal dispute. It's only a political issue. Donald Trump, as president of the United States, he wanted to stop all this immediately, and he doesn't want this to happen in other states.
Okay, but to what extent do you think that the federal immigration raids and the mass deportation goals align with established immigration enforcement policies and human rights obligations, sir?
Well, the matter of the immigration is a key issue for Donald Trump. It was a very important issue for his election. Now we are heading to the midterm elections in a year and a half. And the year and a half is very close. And so he wanted to show that he's controlling immigration, and he doesn't want any dispute about this, and that he wanted to show that he is the master of the game in this important field. And on the immigration, it's one of the issues on which he won the elections. So it's a very key issue for him, and he wanted to show that he's the commander-in-chief on this field.
And that he's actually enforcing it. Well, sir, how could the labeling of protests as insurrection or the national security risk influence the government's use of force and public perception?
Use of public force should be proportionate. This is a rule under American law, under the Constitution and even under international law when it looks into a country. So under the Constitution, it should be proportionate. And there is no element of insurrection. It's only a violation which can happen. It's very common. The police have the possibility to control that. And it is under control until now. But for political reason, wanted to stop this to not spread out.
To further states. Well, that was Mr. Majid Boudin, an international law professor from Paris. And thank you so much, sir, for joining us here today on Q News. And that brings us to the end of our special coverage for today. Don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Q News EG to stay informed. And thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more updates on Q News.